And of course, welcome to part 2, where we jump back into my philosophy on heating and lighting. This week, we're going to learn all about lighting. So if you haven't seen part 1, check it out here. Otherwise, sit back and enjoy.
Now we're going to move into the lighting and heating zone. And this is another fun topic too. So when we talk about heat from the sun, it falls into 2 categories too. And just like the spectrum goes, it's UVC, and UVC is very dangerous. It's very, very narrow wave, and it'll cause cancer on a human and any animal that is exposed to it. So it's dangerous. It's what they use to sterilize medical equipment. It's blocked out by the atmosphere of the sun, so we don't get UVC. We do get UVB from the sun, and then we get UVA, and then there's the whole visible spectrum, right? Starting from violet, because ultraviolet leads into the color violet. And then we go backwards through the rainbow, so the opposite of Roy G. Biv. That word ends with R for red, and now we're in the infrared spectrum. So after red light, now we're reaching into infrared, and infrared is not visible light the same way UV is, and it's reversed too. So it's infrared A is close to the visible spectrum, then infrared B is further down from that, and it's even further from the visible spectrum. And infrared C is way down there. It goes really far in the spectrum. That is just your general heat. It's really far away from light, but it's still electromagnetic radiation. Anything that comes off in this fashion is considered radiation. So what gives off both light and heat? One of the most common ways that this is used inside an enclosure is halogen bulbs. And now halogen are used for a few reasons. One, they're efficient. So they last a long time, they produce a lot amount of heat for the wattage that they use, and they cover a good span of the electromagnetic range in the infrared A and in the visible light range. So these are really great bulbs. What you want to consider with these is the glass. Okay, for different species, you might need a different thing. So here you can see it's got a reflector on the inside, and so this whole unit has a reflector. That's awesome. You'll see that's pretty standard in a lot of bulbs. It's also one of the reasons why halogens are quite efficient. Light bulbs don't have something like this. You don't see anything like this in the old lamps that you used to have in your house. So this bulb, it's going to create a cone of light in one direction, right? It's used for ceilings. So it's not meant to light up a room. It's meant to shine down. But we use them for reptiles. This clear glass like this is going to produce a beam, boop, straight down, pretty straightforward. You could also get it frosted, and the frosted is going to be a little bit more diffused. It's going to be a little bit gentler light. It's going to spread it over a broader area. That's really nice. That's what's going on here. That's a light bulb. It's a 25-watt light bulb because I need to again, it's a rainbow boa. They don't need a lot of heat, and it's inside the cage. And the frosted glass of that light bulb does a great job of keeping the bulb from getting too hot and the basking site to get way too hot. So I really like the frosted glass for lower temperatures. For my rosy boa, my fox snake, and when I had king snakes, these are perfect. The halogen bulbs are really great because they reach a little bit higher temperatures. It's a big broad beam, and it's just what I need. They make bigger bulbs as well, and they'll have the flooding, which is basically like pyramiding on the front of the glass, and that really breaks it up. It's not diffused, it's not frosted, it's just refracted more, and so that is really great for spreading that light out to an even bigger region. So if you have bigger animals that you want to heat, you're going to want something with the flood tip on top of it to really create a bigger basking zone with one bulb, or use multiple bulbs. But this is going to produce light and heat. So it's going to produce light in the visible spectrum, right? We've all seen a light bulb. We know how that works. That's producing light. It's visible. But it's going to go past it into the infrared A zone and actually put off some of that heat that you feel from the sun. Now, this is a great way of replicating natural heat. I'm going to put up an image here on the screen. The sun uses a lot of, the sun puts out a lot of heat in the infrared A range and in the infrared B, and a little bit in the infrared C range. But for the most part, and of course a ton of visible light and UV light as well. But now, since we're talking about heat, we're trying to replicate that. Heat in the infrared A range is going to be super beneficial, and you want this, and you want to replicate this. So whether it's a nocturnal snake or a diurnal snake, they all absorb it the same way and they all use it the same way. The infrared A wavelength, because it's narrower, again, this is think about little particles moving on a wavelength up and down like that, and infrared A might be a little bit narrower. Infrared B is a little bit wider and slower, and infrared C is much wider and takes a lot longer to travel. It's slower, okay? But they all do different things, and we'll get into it. They all have their uses. So infrared A is going to penetrate, because it's that narrow wavelength, it's going to penetrate deeper into skin and deeper into the body and do a better job of warming the animal. The way that animal warms up is the heat goes into the body and blood flows through that body where it's being heated, and that blood warms up and they circulate that warm blood throughout. So if you just have like nighttime heat, no light bulbs or anything like that, it's just going to be the very, and your snake is say this thick, well, that heat is just going to be just, right there on the bottom, right there where it's touching. And so the little blood that goes through that part of the animal is going to warm up, and it's going to help circulate heat. So the snake will warm up. But if you have heat penetrating and it penetrates halfway through the snake with that, you have that whole half of the snake, all the blood that's going through it, that's all going throughout the body of the snake too. And that's warming up a lot faster, a lot more efficient. It's also natural. They evolved to understand how heat from above works. They feel it. You could actually get away, if you have bigger enclosures especially, with higher temps than the animals prefer in captivity. And this is why animals like a Brazilian rainbow boa can live in a place like Brazil where the heat gets up to 95 degrees in the Amazon in the direct sunlight, and they can even absorb some heat there in the 90 degrees. They just spend a very limited amount of time, as opposed to a cool day where it's covered in clouds and they have to spend more time exposed maybe to warm up. So using heat appropriately in replicating the sun is very important. And this produces a tiny bit of heat in that wider range, in the infrared B range. But if you really want to add that in, this is a deep heat projector, also made by Arcadia. There's a few other brands that make these now too. This is going to predominantly produce infrared B radiation. Now we're learning from this from spectrometers and things like that honestly these are not the best product. They have benefits, and I'll get into them, but for replicating sunlight, you're actually going to be closer off with just light bulbs than light bulbs plus these deep heat projectors. But you can still use both, and many of us still do. And it does definitely provide benefits to have the light in the full spectrum, right? So to add extra wavelengths, not just A, but also B. The more we learn about these animals, the more we learn that they use every wavelength of the spectrum. So if you want to replicate sunlight, you need to add this to this and use them both together. This is an ideal setup for your heating and lighting. At least for now, until the technology evolves. You're going to include visible light in the infrared A, and you're going to include infrared B heat as well. Now, a lot of people will use these at night as well, because they don't put off visible heat. They don't put off visible light. I don't love that, because the type of heat that comes at night is not infrared B. Infrared B in nature only comes from the sun. It doesn't come from the hot road or anything like that. It comes from sunlight. So I prefer to have these lights on in the day and use other things for nighttime heat. And I'll show you what I like to use for nighttime. So this is a radiant heat panel. I know what you're saying, this doesn't look like any radiant heat panel I've ever seen. I built this one. This is a pizza stone with heat cable and insulation on the inside, and it's covered in HVAC tape. It's got insulation on the back, and I bolted it up. There's also this model that I use in here, the Pro products. The reason why I'm showing you this one is because I can't hold that one in my hand because I don't want to take it out of the enclosure. It's more work than I'm willing to get into right now. So this is something I use. This is a little one. This is going to work for small enclosures and only for low temps. This is not going to produce a ton of heat. It's got a 25 watt heat cable wrapped around there, secured with electrical tape, and then just up there against the pizza stone. And the way that is, that radiates heat out and up, so it kind of covers the region. And that's only in the infrared C spectrum. Okay, so that's a physical contact heat. It's only in the infrared C spectrum, and that's what you're going to find at nighttime. So in nature, certain things, branches, rocks, boulders, they're going to retain heat. Roads, this is why you find a lot of snakes on roads in the middle of the night. They retain the heat throughout the day that they absorb through the sun. It's all energy. Well, throughout nighttime then, as the temperature drops, they're still charged with that energy because of the way the rocks are built. They have a strong thermal storage, and it slowly radiates that heat throughout the day. And so you can, if you take a temp gun out to the desert in the middle of summer and go, say, like 9 o'clock at night when it's not too late, you could check nighttime temps. The air may have cooled around you to 70 degrees, but if you do a temp gun on the road, you might still see it at 85 degrees or even higher sometimes on really hot days. So it's a really neat way of storing heat, and reptiles, of course, have taken advantage of this. Many people will use the argument, that's how you heat a nocturnal animal only. Ball pythons, they've said, they need belly heat. And it's because these nocturnal animals, or crepuscular, they get used to absorbing heat, not directly from the sun, but by laying on top of something that's still heated, okay? And so there's a couple ways you could do that. With your bulbs like this, the best way to do that is just load up underneath the heat element with rocks, tile, slate. You can make your own. There's Dylan from Animals at Home podcast has a great video where he built a pond for his rainbow boa. In that, he also built a little structure. Let me get it. And it's something like this. So what I did here, this was a tile from Home Depot, and I built a little cardboard box just out of trash, and I put it up there so it's a little frame. I taped it up so it was in a little 12 by 12 inches box. So there's set that on the bottom of it, and then it was up next to the cardboard. Then I mixed just play sand and PCV glue, your regular school glue. I mixed it up and added some black dye, glued some moss on it for aesthetic purposes. If you think it's aesthetic, I don't know. But I also stuck this aluminum tube on the inside and let that all dry, let the glue dry, took the cardboard down. And the cool thing about this is you could stick a thermostat probe, and I use this as a basking site. And it's heavy. It's probably like 8 pounds if I weighed it. So it's got a good amount of weight, and I was using it as the roof to a hide. I had it with big, so you can see like even the glue and stuff on it. I had it big wood chunks on it. It was just too bulky for my purposes, but if I had a bigger enclosure, I would definitely make a hide out of this again, because it's really great to make a hot side hide out of something like this, and you can control the basking temperature right there, and also it's going to radiate that heat down into it too. And the snakes loved it. You could also put something like this on top of a water dish for a lid, and just be careful that it's not going to tip inside it, because again, it is heavy, so you don't want it to be unstable in there and pinch your snake or crush your snake. So be mindful with stuff like that. That's part of the reason why it's not in my enclosure right now, but I absolutely would incorporate this again, just if I had bigger space, because like I said, it's bulky. But this is really awesome. So what happens is the heat just blasts down on that all day, and then at night, when the heat is off, because it's thick and heavy and black and absorbed all that heat, it's going to continue to release that heat during the day, or excuse me, during the night after the heat's off, for a good couple hours. It's not going to last as long or as efficient as a road or a giant boulder. That's just physics. 8 pounds is nothing when you compare it to a 20-ton boulder in the side of a hill that has been absorbing heat all day, right? It's apples and oranges. You can't compare it. But it does do an effective job of radiating heat throughout the rest of the day. So that is one way of providing heat to these animals. I'll also tell you, heat mats are great. It could be something like this. So this is a standard unit. It's got a little thermostat built into it. I don't love it like this. It's just a little dimmer. It's a little bit imprecise, but these are options you see. I like heat tape, and you can tell this has been well used. It's been used on numerous tubs and transports and things like that. And I'd considered getting some fresh ones out, but I wanted to show you this too because it's good to see it in practicality. I love this Reflectix tape, Reflectix installation. It's just used for heating and cooling, and it does a great job. I put this on the back side of all my heat tape. That way it protects any desks or wood furniture that it's on, or carpet if it's on something like carpet. Ideally, carpet's not great just because it can mess with insulation of things and spark fires. So you don't want electrical items right on carpet, but this is a really good job of protecting it from wood. Of course, there's the common Zoomed mats and that sort of thing, and Zilla and all the pet stores have them. It's the exact same thing, except it's just got branding on it. I, again, prefer heat tape because of how flexible it is. Not flexible rigidity-wise, but flexible in terms of sizes and things like that. I can have skinny tape or fatter tape. Here's a real skinny piece, so this is great for like a hatchling tub. I've used this for a 6-quart tub. Hot side, cold side. It's fantastic. This is really good stuff. So you'll see it drives me crazy. You'll see in the reptile lighting groups, folks, there's a graphic that's been spread around where it says this is bad light or bad heat, and it's under tank heaters, it's radiant heat panels, it's the infrared C emitters, and it says this is bad heat and this is good heat, and it shows the light bulbs, right? The infrared A emitter, the halogen bulbs. And while I understand what they're trying to say is that yes, this replicates sunlight, this replicates kind of nothing natural, they're wrong. It does replicate something natural. It's bad to use that as your only source of heat. And the reason why I say that is it's not providing all the benefits. However, like I said, with this, which was over a 6-quart hatchling, I can't provide natural light in a 6-quart tub. It's too close. I can't put any bulb, it's going to give me that much space. I can't put any bulb of light there. You can't put UV light. That's way too close for it. This is the only way you could heat something like that. Now, the goal is to get them into larger enclosures as soon as possible, but young snakes, they like to get started in really confined places. And you can do that with a lot of clutter, but especially if you're raising 20 or 30 hatchlings, or if you have a bigger operation, you're raising 200, it can really make a difference if you have to search for them and feed them inside a large cluttered enclosure, or if they're in a simple enclosure. Now, for anything that is well established and well started, I highly recommend obviously the full spectrum of everything that we've shown here, every UV light, every visible light, and both kinds of heat. But these still play a role, and especially if you're talking about a dynamic, diverse enclosure. If I didn't use the heavy tile and the rocks and the ceramics underneath the heat bulbs, this would be a phenomenal option. Okay, I have deep planted bioactive enclosures, so each one has at least 4 inches, most are closer to 6 inches of substrate. And this heat, it takes a long time to really impact and go all the way through. It'll take several days to set up the enclosure the way you want it and get the heat going. And it's really going to be an inefficient way to heat it. If the substrate layer you have is thin, then something like this can provide that same kind of heat. So if you want to set up on the hot side for the daytime a basking bulb that shines down over this area, right? So if you use let's not use the DP projector, let's use the halogen. If you use the halogen bulb that shines down over this area during the day, well, you've just got something like aspen chips as your substrate, something real basic for your king snake. And he's in a 20-gallon enclosure and you got the daytime heat. Well, you want to have nighttime heat, but you don't want to have light. So this turns off, and then you turn this on at night. So if this is maybe set to 85 or 86, you might want to set this one to 82, 81, 83, or maybe 75, depending on the species, depending on your room. You're gonna have to really determine, the season. There's a lot that can go into it, but you could change it, is my point. You could have this set up on one thermostat or just on a dimmer. That's funny. I thought I grabbed a halogen. I grabbed the UV. Pretend this is halogen. You could have this set up on a dimmer or on a thermostat. You're going to want to use a dimming thermostat like a Herbstat. I just personally use dimmers and just set it and measure it and get it at the right way. That way it's not fluctuating. Use this during the day, and then at night use the heat mat for that belly. It's the exact same way that a snake will crawl out onto a boulder or a warm road after the sun is set to warm up. So I hate when I see the graphic that describes these as bad heat, because these are awesome heat. There's only one way to replicate the leftover residual heat from the ground, and if you think that putting a 7-pound piece of equipment in there is going to be the same as replicating a 20-ton boulder, you're not even close. It's not even going to be close to it. You need something like this. To be honest with you, the whole reason I wanted to make this video was to kind of redeem heat tape and heat mats. These absolutely can be used successfully in an advanced terrarium or vivarium. And the whole point is that it's going to allow you to heat up areas of the ground that your light bulbs may not be able to quite cut. And if you really want to replicate naturalistic environments, there's going to be warm areas on the ground that simply aren't going to be heated the way they need to be heated by a light bulb. I love heat tape. It's super valuable and super effective. A lot of folks will use this as their sole heat element. I don't agree with that for adult snakes, as I mentioned before. There's other things that we've discussed, the benefits of matching the full spectrum of heat from the sun, and I think people sleep on it and write it off and say it's bad. When you use this, the best way to do it is put the probe right here on the heat tape. Is a good example. I've used electrical tape on this one in the past. Stick the probe in there. You don't want to use HVAC tape on the probe. It's going to give you a bad reading because it's metal, but you could use it elsewhere to secure it to the tub and secure the Reflectix tape to it, or excuse me, Reflectix insulation. And these are real simple items. Obviously, the bigger they are, the more wattage they're going to use and the hotter they're going to get, but they work phenomenal. And you put the probe right on the mat, you put the mat under the tank or under the tub, sometimes on the back of the tub, and then you can control the temp directly that way. You can measure it with a heat gun, but you never want to place the probe inside, because what's going to happen is the probe's going to be inside the tank and it's going to be measuring the heat. Well, that's great until your snake gets in and moves that probe off of it. Now your thermostat has no idea what temperature this is, and so it thinks it's cold because the probe is way over here, and this heat just ramps up through the roof, and your snake goes to digest a meal and kills itself because it cooks the meal inside and its organs inside, and no one wants that. It's a tragedy. Also, be sure that you're being safe with surge protectors and your wiring. Sometimes too many outlets can definitely cause fire, so be very careful. Read manufacturers' labels and don't exceed outputs, okay? What's really amazing about infrared A heat is it's actually quite healing. So it's not just the fact that it penetrates and warms your snake cooler. It heals damaged skin cells. It boosts the immune system. It is vital. Even for a nocturnal animal like my rainbow boas. Nocturnal animals typically have skin that is far more absorbent of light, and they don't need much. So just because the animal isn't directly under the bulb, they may be over here, and they're still getting reflections of that light, and small reflections, able to use it, especially an animal that sleeps 12 hours a day in partial light. They're going to absorb quite a lot of energy from that lamp, and they're going to benefit from it. And it's, again, like I said, it's not just about staying warm. It's about a lot of biological activities that their body needs infrared A heat to process. So again, it's a complicated subject. My goal here was just to show you the common types of light and heat and how you use them best. Feel free to ask questions in the comments. I'd be happy to explain them in further detail. If I really wanted to, I could spend at least 20 minutes on each of these items, plus more. So there's a lot more here, and I'm just tip of the iceberg in terms of my knowledge. Okay, there's folks, I'll direct you to other podcasts. Francis Baines has been on the Animals at Home podcast, as well as Thomas Griffiths, who is also on the Reptiles and Research podcast as well. Those are some great videos. I'll try and find those links and put those in the description. It's going to really help you understand heat and lighting as well. but I wanted to show you guys firsthand with the products how to use them, where to use them, when to use them. Light bulbs can go outside the cage and you put them in the standard clamp dome, or if you put them inside the cage, you want something like this. It screws up to the top. It's got a space for the cord to gum. This is the Arcadia version. It's got this little. Is this the Arcadia or this is the Walmart version? This is the Arcadia version. It's just a screen protector, or excuse me, just a bulb protector. It doesn't come with the socket or anything like that. There's also versions that come with the socket inside it already. But you put the light bulb in this, and the reason why this is great is because it prevents your snake from wrapping around it, which when it's on, it can cause a burn. Although most snakes they can see heat, they realize they're not going to wrap something that's got a surface temperature of 160, but it can happen. For me, my biggest concern is that they wrap around it and they either break it or they pull it out and break it, and now I have a broken light bulb in the enclosure. So to me, these are super important because I do not want broken glass with my snake, because they don't have fingers to pick up the broken glass. They're going to scratch themselves up bad, and I don't want that. So if you're keeping the lights inside, put them in a cage. Yeah, that's one of the Walmart versions. It's got the socket built right in, and I actually prefer those to Arcadia. Sorry, Arcadia. If you build them complete as one unit, I'll change my mind. But you could also get these from VivTech as well. They've got some light protectors, and again, use my discount for 15% off. But that's it, guys. Feel free to reach out. I wanted to make this video for a while. I wanted to go over those things. I didn't include some things like heat rocks, which you can't control with the thermostat and are super dangerous. Don't put them in your enclosure. But that's the idea of this. You can use something like this. You can set that up. You can make a modified version of your own heat rock, which is essentially what I could do here. If I wanted to, I would just remove the tape, put a thermostat probe on the inside so it's controlled, and then I could set this up inside an enclosure as a basking surface as a heat rock. And it's not a terrible idea, to be honest with you. The idea of a heat rock is great. The problem is that it's not controlled by a thermostat. It's nice to have something that your animal can just bask on that's always warm, and it's kind of a cute decorative idea. But the danger there is that it can overheat, and especially when they're not getting that heat from above and it's not directly associated with infrared light, with visible light, they can get confused as to where they're actually supposed to be basking, because again, they're used to perceiving all of these things in tandem. It's not just the heat on the ground, it's also the heat from above and the light from above. So without it, they get a little bit confused as to where they're seeking it out. They eventually figure it out because they're smarter than people give them credit for. But you want to avoid stuff that you can't control and that you can't regulate, because it can cause dangerous burns. That's it. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed learning something.